Hey, what are you doing out here, man?
I work here. I'm on a phone call.
Step away from the building, right now.
Is there a problem, officer?
Sounds like drug talk. I need some ID.
I'm the district attorney. My office is...
Don't get smart. Put the phone down, hands where I can see.
For 90 days, a badge gave him authority. For less than 5 minutes, that authority collapsed in public view. What began as a routine morning outside a county courthouse would soon be examined by multiple cameras, multiple agencies, and multiple systems that never forget. By the end of the day, nothing about this encounter could be dismissed as a misunderstanding. Before we go any further, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing.
It's a weekday morning outside a county courthouse in the American Midwest. Attorneys arrive early. Clerks unlock side doors. Cameras are already being positioned for a scheduled press briefing. On the courthouse steps, a black man in a casual blazer walks slowly while speaking into his phone. His tone is controlled. His language is precise. He references an operation, coordinated arrests, and timing. A patrol vehicle slows at the corner. A newly assigned officer watches from behind the windshield. The words are heard. The context is ignored. Within moments, authority steps forward, not to ask questions, but to assume answers. What follows is not a dispute about compliance, but a test of judgment, restraint, and verification. And before this encounter ends, multiple recordings will ensure that every decision is preserved exactly as it happened. This is a reconstructed reenactment based on a real, publicly reported case. The county courthouse had stood on Main Street for over a century. Its limestone columns and granite steps had seen generations of legal history, trials argued, verdicts delivered, careers made and ended. That morning, the building was preparing for another announcement. Just before 9 a.m., the county's elected district attorney arrived early. He planned to change into formal attire upstairs before stepping outside to address the press. Instead, he remained near the steps, pacing lightly while finishing a phone call related to a major investigation scheduled to be announced later that morning. Across the street, a patrol unit slowed. The officer inside had been on the job for less than 100 days. His training was recent. His confidence was untested. From his position, he observed a man speaking quietly, referencing coordinated action, arrests, and timing. What he did not observe was identification. What he did not attempt was clarification. The officer exited his vehicle. His body-worn camera activated automatically. He approached with posture, not curiosity. The first words were not a greeting. They were a command. The man on the phone acknowledged him calmly, stating that he worked in the building. That explanation was dismissed. Instead, the officer interpreted the ongoing phone call as coded criminal communication. No verification was requested. No dispatch inquiry was made. When the man identified himself verbally as the county's district attorney, the response was ridicule. The officer chose escalation. Despite repeated, measured explanations, including an offer to verify identity inside the building, the officer refused de-escalation. He framed compliance as submission and clarification as resistance. This footage would later be reviewed frame by frame. The officer radioed dispatch, reporting suspicious behavior and possible criminal activity. That transmission would later be scrutinized for accuracy. As onlookers began to gather inside the courthouse, the officer positioned himself closer, preparing restraints. At this point, the officer believed the situation was still under control. The man on the steps remained composed. He did not raise his voice. He did not attempt to leave. He did not end the phone call. Instead, he repeated his explanation, calmly, precisely, offering verification through proper channels. He identified his role again. He explained his presence again. He offered to walk upstairs to retrieve identification. Each offer was rejected. The officer did not ask dispatch to confirm the identity of the county's elected prosecutor. He did not contact courthouse security. He did not request a supervisor before escalating. What he did instead was reinterpret cooperation as defiance. The officer referenced prior training, stating that certain phrases indicated criminal coordination. He cited experience he did not yet possess. He relied on assumption rather than confirmation. The phone call remained active. On the other end of that call, a federal agent listened in real time, silently documenting every exchange through automatically logged systems. When the agent's voice briefly became audible, identifying herself as federal law enforcement, the officer dismissed it as fabrication. He laughed. That reaction was captured clearly by the body camera. So as the moment his hand moved toward his restraints, the man requested the officer's badge number. That request was ignored. Instead, the officer issued a demand for identification, knowing it was not immediately accessible, while simultaneously preventing the man from retrieving it. The situation hardened. Witnesses inside the courthouse had begun to notice. Attorneys paused. Clerks stopped mid-task. Several individuals recognized the man instantly. The officer did not. He keyed his radio again. This time, the transmission escalated the narrative. The subject was described as uncooperative. Possible criminal activity was suggested. Aggression was implied. Each refusal is now a recorded decision. Policy violations are already documented. The officer announced an arrest. The stated basis was obstruction. No physical resistance had occurred. No flight had been attempted. No threat had been made. The man verbally clarified his legal position, identifying himself, stating his role, asserting that no probable cause existed for detention. The officer responded by advancing further. His body camera continued to capture the interaction uninterrupted. When restraints were produced, the man did not pull away. He did not struggle. He did not attempt to flee. He complied passively. The first cuff was applied. Above them, courthouse windows filled with observers. Phones were raised behind glass. Security cameras continued recording from fixed angles. A second unit was dispatched. The officer proceeded as though confirmation would arrive later, not realizing that every second was being preserved from multiple sources simultaneously. From this moment forward, every action was being preserved. The second patrol unit arrived within minutes. This time, the responding officer was not new. He had worked in the criminal division for more than a decade. He had coordinated dozens of prosecutions with the county's district attorney. He had stood on those same courthouse steps beside him during press briefings. As he stepped out of his vehicle, he took in the scene in seconds. The restraints, the posture, the crowd gathering behind the glass. Then recognition set in. He froze. The body camera from the first officer captured the shift immediately. The pause, the sudden stillness, the absence of confidence that had driven the encounter moments earlier. The responding officer spoke the man's title out loud. The effect was instant. The first officer's posture collapsed. His certainty drained. His hands hesitated mid-motion, one cuff still unsecured. Reality had arrived too late. The responding officer ordered the restraints removed. His tone was urgent, low, controlled. The cuffs came off. The man adjusted his jacket once. A small, deliberate movement that would later appear in broadcasts, reports, and training materials nationwide. Inside the courthouse, movement accelerated. Security supervisors were alerted. Administrative staff ran messages upstairs. Media crews redirected their cameras. The man requested preservation of all recordings, body camera footage, dispatch audio, and fixed security feeds. Those requests were acknowledged. On the phone line that had never disconnected, the federal agent confirmed that the entire encounter had already been logged and preserved through federal systems. Supervisory staff were notified. Internal Affairs was contacted. Documentation protocols were initiated. The tone of the scene shifted. What had begun as an assertion of authority was now an effort at containment. From this moment on, there was no version of events where this ended quietly. The responding officer positioned himself between the man and the first officer, limiting further interaction. The man declined commentary. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He simply stated what would happen next. The press conference scheduled for that morning would proceed, but not as planned. Inside the building, leadership prepared for a different announcement. Outside, the first officer remained silent, processing the consequences of actions taken without verification. There was no internal explanation that could undo what had already occurred. Internal Affairs took custody of the officer before midday. His body-worn camera footage was downloaded, duplicated, and flagged for review. Dispatch audio was pulled and preserved. Courthouse security feeds from multiple angles were archived without interruption. The federal recording captured during the phone call was authenticated and logged. Within hours, the incident moved beyond departmental review. An external investigation examined the officer's hiring file. Gaps appeared immediately. Required reference checks had not been completed. Prior employment verification was incomplete. Mandatory social media review had been marked finished without documentation. Investigators uncovered years of publicly accessible content that should have disqualified the officer from service. Posts reflected explicit bias, endorsement of misconduct, and rhetoric incompatible with constitutional policing. Those records were entered into evidence. Supervisors responsible for approval were interviewed. The background investigator was terminated. 2 command-level officials were demoted for negligent hiring failures. The officer was dismissed from the department within the week. The stated grounds included unlawful detention, false statements to dispatch, and violation of civil rights. A federal grand jury convened shortly thereafter. Charges were filed under deprivation of rights statutes and false reporting provisions. The same courthouse where the incident occurred hosted the proceedings. At arraignment, bail was denied based on documented risk and recorded conduct. Trial followed. Prosecutors presented uninterrupted body camera footage. They introduced the federal audio recording. They displayed the officer's social media history and hiring documentation. Witnesses testified to what they observed from inside the courthouse. The defense argued misunderstanding and training deficiencies. The jury rejected both. The verdict was unanimous. Sentencing imposed a custodial term, supervised release, and permanent revocation of law enforcement certification. Civil proceedings concluded months later. The county settled the claim for 8 figures after reviewing exposure created by the recordings, public setting, and institutional failures. Policy reforms followed. Hiring protocols were rewritten. Independent oversight was implemented. Additional personnel were removed during secondary reviews. The officer would not return to law enforcement. The department would not return to its prior procedures. The camera kept rolling. There was no quiet ending.